Yeah.
Wasn't that a great night with Giorgio?
No, it was totally unexpected, and yeah, and to have it at the end of that night in particular.
Well, that was, yeah. Anyway, welcome very, very much to Conversation. Pleasure to welcome to the program. Young man, Rich Song. He's a filmmaker, an editor, director, and he's also a person who's very concerned with the human condition, very interested in things, understanding the human condition in large, responsible ways. We met the other night, election night, actually, at our friend's Giorgio Gomelski, who is probably needs no introduction to the people. He has his regular program here on MNN and everything. But Rich, welcome very, very much to Conversation.
Thank you for having me.
What was it, 3:30 before we got talking? We were talking about things that night. But anyway, let's not just go into that. That was fun meeting you and a good talk. And I wonder if maybe you could share, if you could, your own background, born, raised, that kind of thing. Then we'll talk about things, cabbages and kings and so forth.
Of course. I was born in Canada, Montreal, Canada. And my parents moved to New York City when I was 6 years old, and I've been here since. Around junior high school, my friends and I started to make videos of skateboarding together.
Really? Yeah.
And that's actually kind of where the filmmaking nerve in my brain was tapped, and it's pretty much around since then I wanted to get into the film video arts in some way.
Okay.
And I went to NYU, Tisch School of the Arts there for their film program, the undergraduate department. And then afterwards, I guess, I just went into freelance, mercenary-style filmmaking.
Right, okay, very good. One of the family, were they intellectually inclined or not? Because you seem to have a wide purview. You're interested in a lot of very, very interesting and significant things intellectually. You seem to have a lot. Were you encouraged to think along those lines, social concern, that kind of thing? Or
well, I wouldn't...
issues beyond just your own life, you know, I mean.
I don't think that my father was a very philosophical man. He enjoyed long, deep discussions at the dinner table, you know, the kind that go way beyond, you know, the food's all cold now, you know, at some point. He was that kind of a man. But I don't think we ever really talked about the things that I sort of fell into interest. It was mostly about family and culture and just how to approach people, life, and sort of at a more intimate scale. Whereas my interests are kind of as large as it can get, planetary, and, you know, societal.
And your mother?
My mother is more of a simpler person. She's not as, you know, talkative about these kinds of things. But she's kind of a very normal
mom,
Asian wife, you know, very dutiful to the family, and, you know, very
What is
hardworking.
the country background for them? And so is it China?
My parents were from Korea.
Korea, okay,
Yes.
right, okay, yeah.
And they actually came to Canada as a way to actually get into the U.S.
Yes,
because of the quotas at the time. It was much easier to get a citizenship in Canada and then come into the United States as Canadians. And this is before the INS caught on to this and you know, applied more stringent rules. So
and they're tied into the Korean community. They're in New York now, I guess. And they're tied into the Korean community in Korea. See, this is the way things can go. Korea thinks of Japan as a cultural tradition, China as a cultural tradition. They're in between, sort of. You got 5,000 years of culture, Chinese. Right. Do you relate to those roots and so forth, in terms of your own sense of identity and that, or your family, you know?
Well, Koreans tend to be very proud of being Korean. I think there is a long-running sort of cultural tradition of retaining the ethnicity, because they were always in danger of being taken over by either the Chinese from the West or the Japanese from the East.
That's right.
So
sort of like
their history has been primarily one of struggling to maintain or keep their sovereignty in some regard. So that's still very prevalent today.
And it was terribly torn with that war in the 50s. Awful.
Yeah. But, I mean, it was their particular experience at figuring out how to arrange their society at that point in history. So
So it's interesting, and now China's booming and all that sort of thing. And then you said you were on a skateboard or something. We got the idea you wanted to do or at that age, I guess,
Yeah.
and you wanted to do film. You got interested in that and that kind of thing.
I just really enjoyed the process of going out, and because shooting a skateboarding video takes weeks, months,
I suppose, yeah.
and then you just compile the footage and throw it against some music. It was very simple stuff, actually.
Yeah.
But just the process, and then the experience of having that finished product at the end of it was really immensely satisfying. And then around that time, it also occurred to me finally
Now
that
let me get the age now. What age are you?
this was when I was in junior high school to about
So
high
you're
school, so
15,
13 to
13,
16.
Yeah. And what camera did you use to capture the video image? The images?
VHS-C tapes.
You had VHS.
Yeah.
What year would that have been? Excuse me.
That would have been 1992 to
92.
6.
Oh, I see. So you've had this more or less availability of VHS and simple cameras and that from the time you were almost conscious.
Yeah.
See, we didn't have that when I was young, of course, but we used to have what would we call 8mm
films, right?
And I used to make films in that, and I was into using the 8mm, but I wasn't an aficionado, but it would be for home use and everything.
Right.
And my grandfather, if I may, he was from England.
Yeah.
And he used to entertain us. He was 1869, he was born. But he would entertain us in the basement of our house in Detroit, Michigan, with what he called a magic lantern. And the magic lantern was a great big elephant of a machine, had smoke coming out of it. I swear to God, it was a thing with a very bright light, and then they would put slides, and he would put them up on the screen, of the catacombs and that. It'd be essentially like a slide projector, but it was called a magic lantern. Okay. And so media marches on, I guess, is what the story.
Yeah, and the thing that I actually didn't have when I was making those videos was digital. There was no such. Digital actually wasn't really available to, as freely to everyone as it is today. So
yeah, it's all changing.
It was actually a very low-tech system of attaching two VCRs together.
It's appropriate you and I are doing this program now because the whole country is going to be totally digital come February, isn't it?
Yes.
So that transition is being made, and it's going to roil everything, and everything is changing because of it.
Yes.
In terms of the communication, and then there was no internet.
Right, I didn't have the internet growing up either. That came around in towards the end of high school, college for me.
What year would that be?
That would be around 97, 98.
97. Well, it was by then the .com thing was going. It was all coming and all that.
Right.
And cable television had come along in there as a way of distributing.
Right. And then AOL was the starter.
And all that stuff. Yeah. I remember all that. Well, anyway, so you were born into that, and then you were interested in the film. Did you study college did you do undergrad right at NYU, or did you study up in Canada, or?
No, I did. I was here since I was 6. I was in New York.
I'm sorry. Yeah, okay.
Since I was 6, so went to high school here at Stuyvesant High School.
You went to Stuyvesant?
Yes, I did.
Is that down on Chambers?
Yes, it is.
That's one of the best schools there is. I understand.
I believe it's the best public school in New York City.
You think so?
You can claim that much. Yeah.
Is it in New York City? Does that include the Bronx High School of Science?
I believe it was the Bronx High School of Science as well as Brooklyn Technical. Where you take an exam, and depending on how you place on the exam, you gain entry to these various schools.
So is it competitive to get into Stuyvesant?
I would say.
Does it reach out to the whole New York City, or is it regional?
It's to the 5 boroughs, yes.
All the 5 boroughs, and it's competitive to get in? Well, congratulations on getting in.
Thank you.
You had to pass certain tests to do that?
There was one test that applied to all 3 schools.
It applied to all 3.
Right.
Do they give that test to everybody or just some? When I was in high school, if I can reminisce, this is going back to the dark ages, but they used to have a thing called college. They had college preparatory, and there were going to be people who were going to go to college, and then they had vocational.
Wow, okay.
Do they still have that division in the high school?
Well,
training?
I think these schools had that kind of history. I believe Brooklyn Technical High School was more of the vocational type of high school, but it sort of evolved and it became just a regular high school. And the Bronx High School of Science as well as Stuyvesant, they pitched themselves as science high schools. I don't know if that would be a vocational high school. But it was a specialty school.
Well, this was within a school. They would have different, and then they would have home domestic, whatever. A lot of the women would do that back in those days. They would learn home economics, how to make a pie and stuff.
Right.
And that kind of thing. But they had it divided. They set aside certain students who were marked to go into college. That was the difference. I don't know. Everybody goes to college now, I guess it seems. Or
actually, I mean, statistically, I understand that college people who go to college is still a minority. I'm not sure, but
well, I'm trying to think back, and we're just reminiscing and everything. My daddy was a lawyer, and if I'm not mistaken, there's a couple things, and that's coming across the 19th, 20th century divides kind of thing there. And I looked it up on somewhere or something, but I think it was amazing to me that they stood out because they both had graduated from high school. And back around in the teens, I don't have, this is very vague and everything, but back then it was just a relatively small percentage of the people graduated from high school.
Yeah.
Now everybody goes to university, it seems, or
well,
you know,
I think,
there's been a big expansion in education.
I think that has a little bit to do, or I'm sure it has a lot to do actually, with the kind of jobs that people tend to get after school. I mean, the education and the training required to do these jobs. I mean, a lot of these jobs, or to make a certain amount of money, you have to go to college. So for a lot of people, it seems obligatory. It seems like it's a no-brainer. You got to go.
The society's changed a lot. In the 1900, the most prevalent job, role, or occupation was family farmer.
Right.
And it's really something. And then everything went, and it was I don't know, 35% of the population, or 40 or something, family farmer. And then it went down to where it's only about, I don't know, it's less than 2% are farmers in the United States, and they can feed the world with all their combines and things.
Yeah.
So they get thrown off the farm, and then they would go to the factories in Detroit. They came to where I lived a lot. They worked and everything. So things change according to the economy, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that also has a lot to do with the way we use energy, or the kind of energy that we had in the 20th century, mainly in the fossil fuel, the oil age, right? The so-called Green Revolution actually was just an effort of where we would make chemicals, whether they be pesticides or fertilizers, with petroleum, and increase production that way on the farm. So then, and also to have machinery do more of the work, so you would not need as many people out on the farmlands.
I think that's relevant. They had a fellow, Norman Borlaug, he won Nobel Prize for what they call the Green Revolution, where they could go and do a lot like that. And I think I was just watching CNN before I came over this morning, and this damned economic thing is going. Mr. Paulson, our Secretary of the Treasury,
the truth
has just
emerges.
changed it, and they're not getting the credit expansion that they were thinking. There's real serious concern being voiced not only by the people but by our leaders and our so-called academics and so forth. And they're not going to, they distribute the income to people through these labor criteria, and there's something amiss in terms of, at a systemic level, in our economic assumptions coming out of history. Are you paying attention to that?
I am, as much as
off topic, but
no, but we can go there. Let's go there. Yeah, I mean, I would say I follow it as much as the average person,
citizen,
but to me it strikes the debate over how to spend the $700 billion seems to more or less come down to, do we give the money to the top of the food chain or the bottom of the food chain?
That's the way you see it. We tend to see things that way.
Yeah, and Paulson seems to be coming out and saying, come on guys, let's get more of this money into the banks and get the capital flowing up there, and it'll again trickle down, right? And then on the other side, I guess this would be the Democrats' argument being that we got to help the people and their mortgages. We got to change the terms, I guess, and figure out how to keep these people in their homes.
Yeah, and we're going a little far afield because I know you're very interested in energy, and you're very interested in limits to growth, maybe, if to put it that way, that kind of thing, and all that, at a philosophical level. But if you think about it, you could have, and they're still distributing all the income to people through the masses of the people. The only way they have to get what they call income legitimately is to have what you call a job.
Yes.
They got some labor contribution to production, And if you take that analogy of agriculture, it's a little strange. If you go, I mean, back in medieval days, they had big teams that had to work these oxen-driven moldboard plows to get a line of land plowed. You know, it took a lot of labor, and there's a lot of labor application all throughout. But now, if you look at a Kansas wheat field, and they've got a combine, and the damn it grows, and the combine goes up and down and collects everything like that, and goes. And they've even got them now to where there's not even they don't even bother having a driver. Yeah, it just goes by itself, and it gets tons of wheat, and you can feed the world, and there's not a single human being involved in it. Yeah, and we're still thinking we're going to distribute the income to everybody by their having a job. Yeah, and the combine, called the economy, the capital assets or the technology, is, in terms of the national economy, are all owned by a tiny group of people, by and large. Right, yeah. Which is the sort of culture. There's something screwy. And Lord Keynes, if I could, Lord Keynes, a famous economist who set the pattern for Roosevelt and all of that and for the world, he wrote a letter to his grandchildren, and he said, the grandchildren, you're going to be confronted with something that's a little hard for you to understand now, because everything was being distributed to the people through their labor. And he said, we're going to have technologically induced massive unemployment. Mm-hmm. And if the people are depending upon employment to get income, and the technology is going to be displacing not in one place going across the sea or outsourcing or something, but technologically in a massive scale, we don't have a system in place that's going to be able to get demand dollars into the pockets of the people to clear the market if the technology is not creating. But all they do is keep creating more jobs for people rather than letting them own a little piece of that combine. But if they owned a piece of that combine, they would have a steady source of income. But we never talk about doing that. What do you think about all that?
I think it might get there, and it might not get there out of choice. It might
that they're being forced.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, circumstances might force us to get there. I mean, just to go back to this, the agriculture a little bit. Part of what allowed us to get off the farm and get the people off the farm, or actually from the farm to the factory, is the technological revolution.
It's all technology.
Right, but all the technology going on and all the sort of the scientific innovations, whether, it be, again, pesticides or fertilizers or irrigation systems, whatever it might be, it's all so heavily dependent on fossil fuel energy. And when we start to run out, the way they do agriculture will change, and it'll go back to something more similar to what it used to. Labor intensive, less monoculture.
There's a lot of organic farming now.
Right.
That's all current. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But not out of choice, but just because these resources are limited and harder to come by, and that poses a problem because the current system of agriculture that we have at least does produce the volume of
That's agribusiness.
Right, the agribusiness
2% of the population.
Right.
Or you don't even have population. You just have a combine going and picking it, doing it. It's a hell of a metaphor or image.
Right. Yeah. But how long can that be sustained? That's the question.
Well, what about that? Yeah, okay.
And what happens when the things that the agribusiness machine depends on start to run low?
Well, the agribusiness machine will depend upon people with money in their pocket to buy the products that the agribusiness machine can produce in order to clear the market. And that's the problem. And the thing we face worriedly in the whole planet now, a deflationary depression, because the people don't have money in their pocket to buy things that they would either need or want, because they don't have what they call a job, and the machines are taking the place, and they won't allow any money come directly to them through one way would be through an ownership stake of the. If you had the ownership of that combine, if you had one nut on the back wheel. Ownership stake, you'd have a stream of income coming to you by the way things are being produced, if you're not objecting to the technological advancement there are some people that are raging against the technological advancement itself.
What do you? I mean, what kind of technological advancement are you talking
Well,
about?
I mean, we had a program yesterday with Kirkpatrick Sale.
Yeah.
And he's just for the Luddites. He said it's just, you know, it's capitalism, and it's. Do we want to create? We're going to go to organic farming by necessity, and not have agribusiness, or they've got factories. Sara Lee. I don't think there's a single person working in there.
Right, but again, this is
all algorithms turning out cheesecake.
But it's all a platform that's dependent on cheap and plentiful, supplies of energy, right? And when that starts to run out, I mean, again, it might not be a choice, so we may have to. And I think the first step towards that is to acknowledge this truth about our energy supplies, that it is running, that we may be at what they call global oil peak.
You got peak oil thing now, yeah.
And the ramifications of that, I mean, we're so far removed from even getting a good, clear picture on it because we're in denial, or it doesn't even really come up as an issue. There's this constant assumption that it's always going to be there, or that if it doesn't come from fossil fuel, it will just simply swap it out with renewables. But the thing is that agriculture is actually an interesting sort of kind of example, because it immediately demonstrates the limitations of a lot of the renewable energies. You can't make pesticides and fertilizers with solar. You can't, you can maybe irrigate with nuclear power, but even uranium is a finite resource. So It's something that Tom Hartman, I believe, talks about in his book,
I don't
Ancient Sunlight, but the idea that the minimum amount of energy that you consume in any given calendar year is the amount of sunlight you get in that year.
Yeah, there's a lot of it there if we could capture it. Yeah.
So I think it's a slow progression or regression from where we are now, where we're using up the sort of stowed, sunlight energy underneath the earth.
Yeah.
Going slowly back to a society that is less consumptive. And
okay. Are you familiar, if I may, and appreciate it, you're also from another generation, and and you're thinking, you think Schumacher, Limits to Growth, the Club of Rome, the Limits to Growth, the idea also that people are consuming too much. They're going to learn to be able to consume less.
Yeah.
And those kind of things are things that resonate well with you?
Absolutely. I mean, conservation is a first step, but even conservation, if it's sitting on an assumption of growth or a need or a system designed around growth, right, a growth-based economy, then you have to it's just inherently unsustainable.
You think so? Okay.
I think so, because
that's a very important issue, isn't it? Confronting mankind.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the sustainability is a word that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
But I don't think we ever really go beyond to really look at what that means. Sustainability. It seems like the way people use the word sustainability seems to be to have this growth-based economy for a longer period of time, than we can.
What do you think when you say growth-based economy? What is it you're conjuring in your mind? So what does a growth-based economy mean to you? I mean, what does it mean, or what does it mean? Since it is an important issue, tease it out, parse it out a little bit. What are we talking about?
When they say that an economy has to grow, say minimum of 4% a year for it to be a healthy economy, what do they mean? Right. Well, to some degree, what they mean is that we have to steal more from the earth.
That's a loaded word, of course.
Right.
You understand that? Okay, if you want to use a loaded word, that's okay. Use them.
I'm perfectly willing to defend my usage of that word. And then to transform the raw materials into products and sell it to more people for more right. And every year to have an economy grow 4%, right?
Okay.
And if you're dealing with resources that are finite.
Well, that's another assumption. Yeah, go on. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's only so much, fossil fuel in the earth. There's only so much copper in the earth. There's only so much wood. I mean, wood is, renewable, but
okay. Yeah, wood is renewable. Yeah.
But it doesn't match the speed of our usage of.
And there's a big thing in recycling. Telstar. I'm wondering. That's interesting. You want to lay out it a little more or not, or can we talk?
Well, yeah, but just to finish the point.
Yeah, sure. Right.
You can't. You have to. Once you accept the fact that the resources that we need to do anything are limited, in that they're all coming from planet Earth, right? And
yes, I don't accept that, but go ahead.
Okay, if you accept that, or if you accept that the resources are finite, then you have to then conclude that you cannot have growth unto infinity.
And if you don't accept that, then you can have.
Well, I would ask how that is not. Like how would you say that, how can you argue that the resources that we need are endlessly replenishable? I mean,
I don't know. I mean, like Fuller, somebody I don't know if you do the young people your age and everything. Sorry, you're what, 30 or something.
Yeah.
So you're young, and who do they repair to? Are they familiar with Buckminster Fuller? Or some of the thinkers of what was. You're probably sick to death of hearing about the 60s and all that, and Woodstock and all that stuff. But anyway, you know what I'm saying. But the philosophical. Fuller was a comprehensivist, and he pointed out, for instance, you can recycle, and that he had a term he used. I just put it up for your consideration, and I'm thinking about it. He had a term called ephemeralization, and that means you're doing more with less. And in one pattern of growth could be seen that, or I saw Mr. Gandhi one time in India saying, well, you people all have your wonderful comforts that you build up industrially and so forth, and now we want to do it too. So are we going to compel those who are not on the streetcar to never get on the streetcar to where they can have comforts and material comfort and so forth? But he used to argue, among other things, and that's the problem. Are you going to let the woman let her babies starve because growth won't let us to have the growth go to where it's going to reach the 80% of the people that are not being well served by the way the system works now, for the 20% that are living bourgeois and well.
Right.
So that's an argument. So the growth is one of justice and of bringing a better standard of living.
Right, we are talking about total growth. We're not talking about necessarily the distribution of that wealth
they're
within.
Connected. Aren't they connected? Or are they? Or do you want
not
to
necessarily
disconnect it from it? Because I would not want to live in a world without anesthetic, particularly if I had to have a leg cut off.
Yeah.
I'm not enamored of some history or something like that where, in fact, James Joyce, one of our great scholars or poets, said history is a nightmare from which I'm attempting to awaken.
Right.
There's a sense of progress.
Yeah.
And that progress is largely technological. Yeah. So I don't know, is there an anti-technology, a technological bias by youth or by the people limited?
No, I think there's a worship of technology.
Or they're wanting us to live in a cave, or they're saying it's all your fault because you could get by on a 7-watt light bulb instead of wasting more wattage, 10 watt. You have to cut back. You can't have enough. You can't have enough for you. You can't have enough for anybody because you're just a wastrel and that kind of thing. So that's something that doesn't particularly appeal to me. I think rather we could have everybody be in a position. Is it an impossible dream that everyone in the planet plus the ecology could be comfortably at a state where their needs are being met, or is that something we're going to endlessly have people?
Again, that's a distribution issue. That's a distribution issue.
Okay, go ahead.
That's a distribution issue.
But let me just make the one point then, okay, and then we'll get back to it. Okay. He used to make the point to say that for instance, just technological development without good design. If you do good design, ephemeralization. Think of the computer chip. This room was full of vacuum tubes to get what you get on your watch now.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's progress. And copper, there's enough copper has been mined. We don't have to mine any more copper. There's 170,000 tons of copper cable in the cable that went across the ocean that is filled by one little chip on a satellite. That's ephemeralization. You can do more, but don't tell people they're going to have to cut back, or don't cut back on the idea that we can include greater numbers of people within a comfortable scale. Or some of those are some of the issues that when you use the word growth, it could also encompass what we call expansion of justice for all. And do we cut that off and just keep those people that are doing well in their pathos like we have throughout all of history? Those are a couple thoughts that I would tee off with you on.
I don't think that perspective is necessarily flawed. I just think that it's just a way to forestall the inevitable.
What is the okay? Go ahead.
Because I think one of the confusions, or there's a lot of confusion about technology and energy. The way I see these two words being used, or whenever technology gets trumped up as a solution to the energy problem,
as I would do.
It seems to
I'm
me.
a technophile.
It seems to me that people equate the two, and I don't think they're. I mean, technology requires energy. Technology is not energy, right? So even if the technology is much more efficient, it's still predicated on the consumption of energy, and the energy consumption might be much lower or much slower, but I think then you get into another, misunderstanding of the amount of energy that our society has gotten used to, or the scale of things that we've gotten used to, and the amount of energy that scale requires, and the assumption that the totality of renewables can match the level of consumption of fossil fuel. And I think if you study that, you'll see that it's highly unlikely.
It seems that way to me. It hasn't, unless you get the price of oil. If you get the price of oil up to $400 a barrel, then there's a lot of room to maneuver within the market. But if it's down to $50 a barrel, there's so much you can do, much less. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So it's all market driven.
Well, the market interferes with or hampers with what ought to be a kind of undisturbed trajectory of developing renewables.
Okay.
Right. I mean, every time the renewables actually gets talked about seriously, OPEC reacts a certain way by adjusting prices or production or what have you. Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a big mess, and
it
you
is.
can't.
Yeah.
You have to take into account all these different factors, but at the same time, you have to understand that these factors are affecting the picture a little bit. But to go back to this technology versus energy thing, I think it's one of the misunderstandings that we are going to learn the hard way, probably, that technology is not energy, and that they're two separate things. And I think another aspect is the human population. All we add a Los Angeles to the planet every year, and these very same people are all, like you said, in China and India, for example. They also want to get at this energy, even if it's
they want to get at a decent standard of living, don't
which
they?
requires
which
requires a tremendous amount of energy.
Yeah,
I mean, China has to put up a new coal power plant every week or every lesson, I think.
And then you got all those things Mr. Gore's paying attention to, with his inconvenient truth.
Right. Now, is that sustainable? Like for us to...
all right. Could I back off a little bit now and go to another?
Go for it.
UN says that it looks like the UN, by 2020, the population of the world is going to level off at about a little under 9 billion.
Do you know why this?
And it's come, Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
No, but they say that, and I've heard that too. But I'm wondering why they think it's going to level off and not just continue to grow. They seem to be aware of some factor that is going to limit or cause human population to cap off.
Well, you understand. You read enough and everything that populations, when they begin to have growth. I mean, when you have agricultural societies, everybody's dying. And so you have 13 kids because you have to have that in order to keep the genes going or something like that, because life is so grim.
Okay.
Mostly life is grim for most of the people throughout most of history. They've been poverty-struck.
Okay. So
not living in the imperial palaces that a few people set aside for themselves, which we have now in our modern mansions for the bankers and whatnot, that kind of thing. But it's been like that. But then when they get into where they have industrialization, then they can have smaller families and do.
I see.
Yeah.
It's this idea.
And they equate growth, industrial growth, with a decision on the part of the people not to have large families, as they did in agricultural times. That's what the normal assumption is.
Again, they're assuming that. I guess it sounds like it's a matter of developing nations or people in developing nations kind of graduating to develop, and where they would not have to have so much offspring,
you
to
can
combat.
See Europe where it's better. They build up their industrial base, they build up their consumer base, they build up all this kind of thing, and so they just have, and it's leveling off the population. Yeah. And they project that from the UN Population Center and everything to level off about 9 billion, and we used to have all this Malthus. Malthus would have said, it's geometric growth of. Arithmetic growth of life support and geometric growth of population, Malthus and that, or limits to growth and that kind of thing. But that's a big question, one you've been wrestling with a great deal.
Yeah, and I would actually say if we look at the last 10 years where population has been growing the fastest, it turns out it's been the Middle East. And the thing about the Middle East is they have pretty good supplies of fossil fuel energy.
They're pretty good. They're sitting
right,
and
which actually brings me back to what I call what they call the three hockey sticks of.
What's that?
There are these three charts that kind of overlap, and they have an amazing similarity, and they basically kind of, I guess for you it would go like this.
Yeah, growth.
Right.
Yeah.
And the three curves would be. Fossil fuel consumption, oil consumption. This is the history of mankind, and this would be like 100 years, the last 100 years.
It's all going up exponentially.
It would just shoot up in the last 100 years, and likewise with carbon dioxide emission in the last 100 years, and likewise human population. We've been at about 1 billion for most of our history, and then in about 100 years we shoot up to.
Yeah, but that's because you've got this growth. You got hyperbolic, and then it goes like that.
Right.
But the thing is that they're now it's leveling off. I mean, the Malthus. I don't think Malthus holds, at least in modern calculation.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think that. I don't assume that.
I mean, I haven't looked into.
Okay.
Malthus enough to comment on that.
Paul Ehrlich's another you could go on, the population bomb. There was a lot of reading about that. There's less about it now in terms of that because the population seems to be leveling off.
Okay.
But we have other problems.
Well, but the point is more. Is it not a valid question to ask? The growth of human population in the last 100 years does not have anything to do with the amount of energy that we've had access to in the last 100 years.
It doesn't? You think it does?
I'm saying it does.
Certainly does.
I think it's a totally valid question. And I think
it's
more than just a valid question. I think the answer, in a lot of ways, it is.
Yeah, right. It's been a petroleum.
Right, and then going back to the growth of human population in the last 10 years, like I said, the fastest growing areas have been the Middle East, where they have the cheap and plentiful fossil oil and natural gas.
Yeah, which also has netted them considerable income.
Right. So then, if you keep following that logic, you eventually have to get to the point where you say, well, what happens when we start running out of the fossil fuel?
What does happen when we run out of it? That's the thing you're thinking. Let me ask you a broader general question, pattern. Are you optimistic for the human prospect or not? Or do you sometimes wax pessimistic? And just one little thing to put in your mind is we now have weapon systems that are species lethal.
Yes, we
understand the difference, the existential significance of that. One wonder, that's on the killingry side. And we now have the technological extension of our consciousness. We've become so clever. Other creatures can do that. They can't extend and make the world different than the way it is, more or less. They make a nest or something. But we've really been able to do that. We take the measure of the whole universe. They're going to have the CERN is going to give us, within a nanosecond of the Big Bang, 13.7 billion years ago, That's really taking the measure of things in a consciousness way that isn't characteristic of the rest of evolution.
Yeah.
So it's some sort of a point. And now we can extend our consciousness through technology and make the world different. And a lot of that has been for war, so one group can go steal the grain from somebody else and take that kind of thing. That's the nightmare history that James Joyce saw. And then now if someone push a button, every single human being on this planet is dead.
Yes.
Species lethal. We couldn't do that in any of history until just recently.
Right.
Okay. What on the obverse side of that would be the living side? Or where do we go? If we're not going to go that route, that's the big question. It's still there, and they still haven't got a solution that seems to work even at the basic elemental level of economic justice with growth and sustainability and ecology. They don't have a pattern. Our leadership doesn't. So the trend is, and when you get toward anarchy, that's what's really dangerous for somebody getting to the point where they're going to do something really irrational, like, goddamn, we're all going down Jonestown or something. You understand
that,
I do. Okay? And so what's the adverse side of that destructive scenario, which is part of the condition of evolution in this particular part of the universe? If you start getting outside of it and seeing it Gaia-like, you know, the evolution of consciousness and the uniqueness of consciousness as we have it. We have no other contact with consciousness in the whole universe or even multi-universes that might be out there except this. And do you understand that kind of a question? And that's in context with, you think we're going to make it? And if we're going to make it, what constitutes the sum and substance of that adverse side to the destruction, the joining of entropy that could be characteristic of this time on a liberating side?
I mean, it doesn't have to be either or, though.
You don't? Okay.
No, I mean, there could be plenty of destruction, plenty of societal decay on our way to something that we, as a species, need to get to.
Oh, we can still, as the British say, muddle along.
Right, and perhaps
and contain the. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
And perhaps these catastrophes may be, you know, if it's, you know, experienced in the right way, or I don't know what the right way would be, but it might awaken us to certain truths. Right, I think global warming is there's a lot of opportunity for the planet to actually act together as one species. Again, I used to kid around as a kid in high school, like every war. It seemed like, you know, the thing that would end all wars is if an alien came and that would unite us all.
Well, that would,
you know?
but it hasn't happened yet.
Right, we don't need an alien.
Yeah, you don't need an alien.
We don't need an alien because we have global warming, and I think that's when we can actually start acknowledging the fact that we're all in this together, like truly, you know, and we all have an equal stake, you know. And so we may suffer the effects and the consequences of global warming, whatever it might have, whether it be, you know, endless Katrina after Katrina after Katrina, or, you know, maybe even worse. But in our struggle to address this together, we may come out enlightened and, you know, in a different place.
What I was trying to get at, right, is that it's not the reality as we look at the reality, like the political reality you're talking about. What you're talking about is it's almost like a capability. Do you understand the difference between a latent or capability? That we have the capability, I just make that point. We have the capability because the zeitgeist and the collection of the whole, if you see it whole, comprehensively, what is there, is that we can, if it's unleashed. Couldn't do it in the Second World War. We were impotent. We were gestating in an evolutionary sense. Now the capability is there to destroy. That's a capability. It isn't the reality, and it isn't the special case viewing of special parts within the overall reality. It's a taking and a reading of the whole reality in terms of capability. And has there been any change in terms of the technology? Because my life experience now, every day there comes a revolution over the transom in every field in science and capability. We have a technological capability of providing for everybody and the ecology that we simply haven't had out of history. We're very close to fusion. We get to fusion, we got unlimited energy. And the thing, rather than compressing, we're going to be able to liberate. We're going to have a liberation where we've never had justice in any system scale. It's always been a few peasants and that we may be at a time of liberation and coming to a new order in the universe
I wonder,
rather than constricting.
Yeah, but the thing is that I wonder if, when you look at technological progress over the ages, I wonder if the capabilities that technology affords us, if it necessarily affects human behavior. I think it's all about the actor. I mean, you can give, nuclear energy is a perfect example. You can wipe out the planet with it, or you can power spaceships with it. I mean, it's about how you use it.
No,
and
you can use nuclear energy as a source of energy.
Right.
And but then there's thing, but
my point is that what we should be looking at is the actor in this. It's the human being, because I think, yes, it is a breakthrough of sorts to be able to wipe out our entire species at the push of a button. Yes. But I think I see it as another peg in a kind of an unbroken narrative, which is this kind of pursuit of more. Human beings have always been.
Well, more in what sense? If I could, 4.5 billion years ago, consciousness that we are carriers of was contained within Australopithecine. 650 million years ago, all fauna was in the form of unicellular spongiform. There's an evolutionary process.
Yes.
There's an evolutionary process that's happening. Fuller used to say that all systems move toward chaos thermodynamics. It all moves to chaos to the limits of the system, closed system, and that you have a movement toward entropy. We may be moving toward entropy. But then he said, he cast about for the biological process is an anti-entropic function in universe to bring increased conscious pattern to the process of which we've been a part. We couldn't do it 4 million years ago, but we're coming. There will be a moment when it will be transcendent to what we've been throughout 200,000 years of Homo sapien existence.
Not necessarily.
Are we coming to a point where we're going to come into a new relation? Do you understand? Are we at a point? It's like pregnancy. 9 months, the water breaks. There's a change. There's an alteration in terms of our situation collectively as a Gaia. The principle of Gaia. We may be coming to like transcending scarcity. One of the models of that would be we can produce food so that woman in Africa can feed her child. They don't have to have all the zero sum. There's not enough. There's scarcity. It's always been scarcity. We may be actually transcending scarcity. We have enough with good design, nanotechnology, things that are coming. We don't have to rape the planet as we did in the past in order to bring justice to everybody in a way that all the cells in an organism count. And we just discount so much of it. You understand? Maybe it's a liberation time, birth to a new way of being.
I hope
a positive thing.
I hope that we can get there, or I hope that we can get the.
Well, we may be there. 9 months.
I'm not
is
sure
when
about
the water
that. I'm not
breaks.
sure about that because I feel like the current, market economy that we have right now is a sort of an extension of the urges of our, the monarchs of the past, where it simply just allows the average, individual to partake in that pursuit of more.
Okay, more being
more
what?
being anything.
What
More
about,
being
was it
power, comfort, what have you.
Yeah, let me bear with you here a minute. 4.5 million years ago, evolution has a way of its own.
Yeah.
We were Australopithecine.
Okay.
We couldn't make a stick. We couldn't make a spear.
Yeah.
650 million years ago, we were a spongiform. We were unicellular. More is like, do you understand? More is like, liberation is impossible. There's not going to be a transformation where we're going to have justice. Or it's like the prophetic traditions and the thoughts of all our wisdom schools that we're going to have a thing that's going to serve everybody in a way where everybody is not going to be having to fight one another over scarce resources. We're going to have enough for everybody. People will be concerned with the things that really matter rather than grubbing for a living. All these
we are capable.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, we are capable.
And that we were not capable of doing that most of all of human history. That was the reality, scarcity.
And now
we're transcending that.
Now we're capable of that.
Incapability, and we don't have systems. They're all predicated upon a system that we're transcending.
Right.
And we don't have a system that can relate to the future, what the future requires, and that's our political problem now with all thinking, economic, political, and everything else, is not geared to what the future requires. to realize liberation. That's the test we're collectively being put through, and we're all enthralled to institutions that are outdated, out of a period that's being outdated by the zeitgeist in the universe.
Right.
Can you grasp or make
yes,
any
I can.
sense?
So,
okay. So growth then is liberation. It's not an evil thing. It's liberation, or seeing things in a comprehensively liberating way and fulfilling purpose of conscious understanding in this part of the universe, perhaps.
But why is growth necessary to that?
I don't know. Why does evolution exist? Fuller said the biological evolution.
No, but I mean, if we have the capability through our technological prowess now to
destroy?
To genuinely transcend scarcity. Right.
Okay, go on. Fuller said we did around 1970.
But why
in terms of capability?
Like, A, why is growth necessary to that model? And B, why are we here? If we are
what do you mean by growth? What do you mean by growth?
Or what do you just mean by growth?
Well, let's say that Homo sapien appears. Okay, Homo sapien appears, and we're now taking the measure of the universe. That is an advance in time from Homo habilis or from Neanderthals. Right? Why? Okay, and what will it be? We've been as phase, and we can pass this on, or we can join entropy. We're being, but we can't allow it. But the capability has been transformed. I mean, the zeitgeist has transformed our capability from what it was historically throughout 200,000 years we've been here.
I think
it's time for us to come into a new relationship to the broader system, is what I'm saying. It may be a time of liberation.
I think I have a slightly different perspective.
I think you probably do.
On the human narrative, or I mean, if there is a narrative. But what I see is a creature, I mean, namely us, that still lives with a lot of our evolutionary baggage. And
reptilian core.
Right, and I think, again, this thirst for more that I was talking about.
More is that greed. Are you recording that with like greed? Greed,
that's what we call it. But
the
urge for more is something that we inherited from the millions of species that came before us. And the thing is that out in nature, there's nothing like a human brain. You know, every creature, every species, every insect, every plant is bound by certain limitations. So it behooves each entity to constantly want more, because
Well, I think that's like
that endless that engine that keeps them striving for more constantly is what keeps them surviving.
Well, if there wasn't something that was going up the line, 650 million years. Go ahead.
But what happens when you introduce something like the human brain to that kind of...
Well, it took 650 million years to get there. 3.7 billion years before there was evolution. It was all protozoa. I mean, it was all, just bacteria. And then there was something moving up that line, and there was an impetus to change. It's like 650 million years ago, the uniform cell. They could be sitting there, this is cool, this is steady state, this is cool. Let's put up some curtains and just stay here. There's an impetus to move. And we call it Western, you might call it male, you might call it whatever it is. There's an impetus to move and to change and to that. And that impetus is going to move us to where we're going to move into, and we're going to become, it's like transhuman. Or we're moving away from, history is a nightmare from which we're attempting to awaken. Then this may be the time of doing that.
I guess
after 10,000 generations of muddling along.
If we recognize that that's what we're doing.
But you have to recognize what's different that makes possible something now that has not been possible throughout history. You got these outdated institutions. They're all predicated religiously, and there's not nearly enough. We got to steal from them, get from them whatever, in order we can do better. All the fighting and that kind of stuff, there's not enough. On the other hand, there is enough. And there's a whole series of different kind of institutions that have to be established within the context that's going to let us realize the capability. It's at a level of capability that we can't realize within the old system, like a caterpillar coming out of a cocoon, or a caterpillar going into a cocoon coming out a butterfly.
Yeah. But I guess I just look at it as... I think there's an overarching sort of phenomenon to all these subdivisions that you see, whether it be the advent of nuclear fusion, or I think there's a longer ongoing sort of kind of phenomena, which is this species called Homo sapien, that is more or less like every other organism on this planet. We rely on the sun for energy, and there are all these challenges put forth on us by nature, right? And limits our ability to survive and procreate, right? And only the best of us survive. But the human brain was our best asset in combating these limitations and these challenges of nature. And it became such a runaway success. It was so good at dealing with nature.
Well, that could be like a
cancer, that
in
a couple million years, it just it really took off, right? And now what my point is that we still have those urges for more. We still constantly act as if it's constantly scarce.
It's all there, right? But we did
you got a billion, but there's just still this sensation that even if you have $1 billion, there's a scarcity, this sensation of scarcity for the next billion, right? We're still operating off of that urge. It's only enabled by this thing called the human brain.
What happened if everybody felt they had enough and they were comfortably leisured?
Then I think we can truly strive for something called sustainability.
That would be.
Right,
and
but
also
I think
appreciation of the ecology.
Right.
We're embedded in, we're also walking around in bacteria. It's all one interrelated Gaia system.
Right.
And we get to that, what's going to let us get to that consciousness to where it affects the political leadership and the institutions?
And I think that's when nature, disproves some of our assertions that we are above nature, that
go embedded in nature. It's all one system.
But we tend to think of ourselves as separate from nature, or better than nature, or again above it. That nature is there to service us.
We didn't get a chance to show your film clip. You're a filmmaker, and you see we got talking about this, and I can't believe it. I look at the clock.
Are we out of time already?
We're out of time, and we've been talking. I'm sorry, Rich. We have to do another program sometime to demonstrate your film and everything. I really enjoyed. These are issues that are interesting to me, and they are to you.
Yeah.
So let's hope this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
I hope so.
And we can have many other talks over tea, coffee, or whatever, and everything. I'm sorry we ran sort of short on time, but he is a filmmaker. We had a clip we were going to show. We'll do it on another occasion. This is Rich Song. Your pleasure to have had his perceptions. And tune in tomorrow. We're coming back. There's no point in talking if the tape isn't running. It's a technological time, but we touched on some subjects, and I'm optimistic. I think we may be at a time of. I think they're getting their act together, being forced to at the political, economic level. And once they get to that, they'll be able to open upon sustainability and appreciation of the ecology.
It'll be tough before it gets better, but it will get better.
Okay. Well, let's hope so. I am very concerned about these guys running around with their finger on that red